name is Eric Patterson, and this is the Religious Freedom Institute's 3 Questions on Ukraine interview series. The purpose of the series is to increase understanding of religious dynamics in the region, and in particular, the multidimensionality of religious freedom in Ukraine in particular. My guest today is José Casanova. Dr. Casanova is a senior fellow at Georgetown University's Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, and a professor emeritus of Georgetown University. He's a leading, globally recognized sociologist of religion, and he's been a long-time viewer and participant in Ukrainian affairs, including with family on the ground during this very, very difficult time of following the invasion of Russia. He's published works on a broad range of subjects, including religion and globalization, migration, religious pluralism. Of course, his best-known work, Public Religions in the Modern World, has been translated into many different languages over the past 25 years, and it's considered a classic in the sociology of religion. Professor Casanova, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Eric. We are also close friends, let's say it.
Yes, I'm delighted in over a decade of friendship with my good friend, José Casanova, and the advice he's given me over the years. Well, José, you've written about Ukraine's unique religious pluralism, its denominationalism. So would you explain to us a bit about the state of affairs in Ukraine?
Right. My first visit to Ukraine, what was striking to me to see 3 competing Orthodox churches, 1 Greek Catholic church, all 4 of them claiming to be the national church, and then a proliferation of all kinds of Protestant groups, Baptists, Pentecostals, Methodists, Lutherans, and Jewish communities and Muslim communities. And somehow I thought I was in the United States, not in Europe. Namely, as we know, the European model is that of a national church and more or less toleration of small religious minorities. This is the homogeneous Protestant North, homogeneous Catholic South, and then 3 societies in between, which are bi-confessional, Protestant Catholic, half and half, unable somehow to ethno-clean the other religion. And Ukraine, for very, very special reasons, has not followed this model because being a colony, never had a state. It was taken by, it was in between, their orthodoxy was between Poland, Catholic Poland, the Lithuanian Commonwealth, and Imperial Russia. So always had the uniates. And then there were always attempts by the Orthodox to develop their autocephalous church. And this would happen after independence, precisely. So it is a denominational system. And I will tell later about why it is unique, even within Europe, and I would say even within the United States. But ultimately, this is what it is. The fact that there is a state, they decided to have the dual principle of no establishment and free exercise, and therefore has given the possibility for 4, when you have 4 competing churches, they stop being churches and they become denominations, and they allow all the religious minorities to become denominations also. This is what happened in the United States when you have the Congregational Church in the north, the Presbyterian Church in the middle, the Episcopal Church in the south, and then they could not become the Church of the United States. And then the small minorities, Baptists and Methodists, and many others became equal denominations.
Yeah, at RFI, we call this free exercise equality. This idea that government protects, but doesn't invade the right of individuals and groups to freely exercise their faith publicly in society. And there's this competition, a good-hearted competition that develops as individuals have a variety of choices about how they worship. Now, you've been a close observer of religion in Ukraine for some time, and obviously religious leaders play a role in this, whether in the Maidan Revolution or in this genial competition in this marketplace. So would you tell us something about how it is that religious leaders here have figured out how to not just live alongside one another, but actually to get along?
Well, we must start with the situation before independence. When Glasnost came in 1987, very late to Ukraine, there was only one officially recognized church in Ukraine, in the Soviet Ukraine, and this was the Orthodox Russian, the Russian Orthodox Church. Every Christian had to be member of the Russian Orthodox Church. But Glasnost brought the opportunity for Greek Catholics to once again go back to their Greek Catholic churches, for autocephalous Orthodox, and so on. So it was from this movement then, you have this proliferation of communities. But then why there was not real fight, other than the conflict of the Moscow Patriarchate, which still claims to own the whole territory, but all the others somehow live together, I would say, harmoniously. Partly has to do with the fact that they were together, all of them in the Gulag. The religious dissidents, Greek Catholics, Jewish refuseniks, Baptists, the Orthodox, they met in the Gulag, and they were all there for religious freedom. And they then developed, and this is the sociological miracle of Ukraine, how out of a society that has suffered so much in the 20th century, there has been this possibility of emerging a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multilinguistic, tolerant democratic society. And this is what is signified by the existence of this unique organization. It's called AUKRO, the All Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations. There are all the three national churches, Greek Catholic, Autocephalous Orthodox, and Moscow Patriarchate, and the Roman Catholics, and all the Protestant communities, and the Jews, and the Muslims, all of them equally, and their equality is expressed by the fact that the presidency of the council rotates every 6 months. And any 6 months, today maybe the Jews, tomorrow the Protestants, then the Orthodox, the Greek Catholics. And then in Maidan, all of them were together. In fact, they went together to Yanukovych, the president, when they were beginning the suppression, the violent suppression, with two petitions. One, not to use force, to basically negotiate their difference, and offering themselves as the mediators between government and civil society. And this, after the Maidan, I mean, in Maidan, they were all together, praying together. If you look at the 100 so-called celestial martyrs, that's what they call them, there were Orthodox, Greek Catholics, Jews, Armenians, and so on, Muslims. They were part of the 100 that were killed at Maidan. And they were multi-religious funerals for each of the person dead. So this was the kind of a civic multi-religious, interreligious conversation dialogue that made possible then the development of a more tolerant society after. Another expression of this pluralism. Immediately after Maidan, you had the 4 highest offices of the land, democratically elected people. They were members of 4 different denominations. The president Poroshenko was a member of the Orthodox Church, but of the Moscow Patriarchate. So you have the president of Ukraine being member of the Moscow. That's why he was the leader to try to ask the ecumenical patriarch to legitimize the Ukrainian church, because he wanted to, he and his family, his wife is Russian, his children wanted to worship in a Orthodox church in communion with global Orthodoxy, and they felt they could no longer worship in the Russian Orthodox Church that was in war with Ukraine. The second was the Prime Minister, Yatsenyuk, Arseny Yatsenyuk, a Greek Catholic. The third, the Speaker of Parliament, and then the head of the National Security Council in war against Russia, a Baptist minister, Turgenev. And the fourth, the chairman of the Verkhovna Rada of the parliament, a Jew, Volodymyr Groysman, who was prime minister when Yatsenyuk became, when Zelensky became elected president by an overwhelming majority. So at one time you had that both the president of Ukraine and the prime minister were both Jews. This is unthinkable in any other European country. What is relevant is the fact that nobody cared if they were Jews. Namely, this was not an issue. This was not a political issue. The same way that, so it's not that those people represented their religious community. No, they were citizens of Ukraine that were elected by Ukrainians, not because, but despite their religious identities. So there is religious pluralism in civil society, but it has no repercussion. It is not politicized religion at the top, and there's no religious conflict at the political level.
All of this is absolutely fascinating because we know in the United States case historically that it was often in churches where the basic skills of citizenship were manifest. And this was true in the early colonial period, but it was also true in the American Civil Rights period. And so freedom of speech, the right to assemble, what is published, the freedom of the press, the right to raise one's children in the faith, to make decisions about children's education and things. We think about these in the American experience, but it sounds like much of what's going on in Ukraine is also, in a sense, faith-friendly. In other words, religion isn't excluded from the public square. It's not entirely the only thing in the public square. It sounds like people are living a very natural life in this representative society. What else, my third question for you is simply, in conclusion, what else should we know? What would you wish that someone who wanted to know about religious pluralism or the dynamics on the ground at this moment, what else would you like for someone to know?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the other story is the war itself. And there is a religious dimension to the war in the sense that on the part of Russia, on the one hand, Russia is an empire. And as all the empires, they're also multi-religious. So the Russian Empire was multi-religious. The Slavs are Orthodox, but then you have the Jews and the Muslims and the Buddhists and so on. And today you also have non-Christian religions recognized as traditional religions of Russia. But for Russian Slavic people, there is this ideology of the Ruski Mir, which I would call it a heretic, Manichaean, unchristian, Orthodox political theology, which very comes close to kind of ethno religion, whereby one single territory, all Rus, one single language, Russian, one single nation, the Rus, and this includes Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Russians, one single church, the Moscow Patriarchate, and one single Tsar, Putin. And this is precisely what is leading this war. They are liberating Ukrainians so they can become again members of the Russian Orthodox Church of the Ruski Mir. Of course, to do that, to kill them, to invade them, they have to say that they are under Nazi control. That's why you need to denazify Ukraine, demilitarize it. And although, of course, when you have the rulers of the country being themselves Jews and telling them that you are ruled by Nazis, it's a kind of propaganda which is very difficult to take seriously. But this is, and of course, on the other side, you have that today. I mean, we know what happened with the annexation of Crimea, what happened in Luhansk and Donetsk. The first people to be repressed were religious leaders that were not Moscow Patriarchate. Orthodox, Ukrainian Orthodox, Greek Catholics, Protestants, in the case of Crimea, Muslim Tatars. And this is what the hit list that we know from Russia, of course, if they are successful, if they occupy, it will also be the death sentence for Greek Catholics, for non-Russian Ukrainian Orthodox, and for Protestants or for any other religious group that doesn't recognize the new regime. So this is, unfortunately, this is what we are facing as a possible tragic future in the days and weeks ahead.
I appreciate you making that very, very clear. We have two models here in these two countries, even if they weren't at war, one of religious pluralism and robust religious freedom, and just across the border, one which has brutalized religious minorities, say like Jehovah's Witnesses, and has this ethno-religious ideology perpetrated from the Kremlin in the society. We are really at a time where the entire world's attention is focused on Ukraine. It's a time for prayer, for peace, and for justice. And it's also a time where we need to deepen our understanding about the religious dimensions of what is going on in that part of the world. So Professor Casanova, Jose, thank you for your friendship, and especially thank you for this wise look at what's going on in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric, for doing this. The world needs to know. And so thank you for doing this.